Death in Dungeons and Dragons can often feel like little more than a minor setback, a bump in the road that characters are barely fazed by. But today I want to tell you about my homebrew resurrection system that gives death the narrative weight that it deserves. This video is sponsored by Tome of Mystical Tattoos, now on Kickstarter. More on them later. Greetings gamers, I'm Anto and I've killed enough players to qualify as a CR10 monster, and recently we had the first death in my Ashk campaign. Hyena, the party sorceress, died in a battle with a bunch of Gith cultists, a dragon, a warsuit. It was a whole mess. It was another classic situation where the players knew that they should cut their losses and run, but they kept trying their luck round after round. The battle itself was absolute chaos, and between them the players went down a total of 9 times over the course of 4 hours, but it was only Hyena who went down and didn't get back up, though it was almost a TPK. One more failed save and it would have been over. So Hyena was dead and the party decided they wanted to try and bring her back. Now at the time they were only level 4, so they had nothing that they could use to bring her back. It was well beyond their own skills and they needed some help. Now I've played with this group for years, and in my last campaign the afterlife had been taken over by an evil god, and the process of bringing someone back was pretty harrowing, so I was excited to play around with my resurrection mechanics in a world where the afterlife hasn't been turned into the Upside Down from Stranger Things. But before we dive into my mechanics, I want to talk about why I wanted to do this, why I want my own mechanics for death. Rules as written, to bring a character back to life, you cast one of a few spells like Revivify, Raise Dead, or Resurrection, and you pay the material cost for the spell, and then bam, it's over. The character is back up and running, and everybody is happy. Now there's nothing wrong with this, of course, and the material cost baked into some of these spells is sometimes enough to make it a challenge, but I personally feel like the knowledge that so long as you have enough money, you can just keep getting resurrected, it takes a lot of the fear away from death. At higher levels especially, death is really little more than a momentary inconvenience, and not the character-altering event that it really deserves to be, especially when you consider that 5e doesn't give you a huge number of ways to spend your gold as it is, so saving it for multiple resurrections is quite likely. So our first goal with these homebrew mechanics is to add a greater sense of weight to death. To achieve this, I strip out the spells Raise Dead, Resurrection, and True Resurrection, and replace them with slightly different ones, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Our next goal is to give the player who died some juicy roleplay thing to bounce off. Just coming back to life like you're a lamp that got turned off and on again isn't interesting, but being led back from the afterlife by your friend's spirits, that is much cooler. This does mean that you need to have a clear idea of how the afterlife works in your setting, but if you don't already have that, you can steal mine. When someone dies in my setting, their soul goes to the soul realm, the cosmic waiting room where they wait until they go on to the next place. The soul realm is ruled by the deity Ilaria the Traveller, and with each turn of the moon, so every month, she departs the soul realm with all the souls that are there and takes them to their final resting place. Now this adds another layer of tension to Resurrection, because now you've got a time limit. You've got until the turning of the moon to get your stuff together and bring your friend back, or they've gone forever. Next, let's talk components. I think the diamond components are fine, but there's some powerful magic we're performing here, and I want to tell a story with the components of this spell. My line of reasoning here is that you need some kind of reagent to make sure that when your PC's soul comes back into their body actually heals and they don't just become kind of like a sentient corpse. The way I handle this is looking at blood. Blood magic has a long history, it's evocative, and if you were to take the blood of a creature that could regenerate and use it in the spell, well, that makes sense to me as to why it would allow the player to heal after death. So I include a creature's blood, usually a Hydra because Hydra are badass, as one of the components in the spell. So now we're really cooking, building all the layers of that dramatic lasagna. We've got a time limit, we've got a monetary cost in the form of purchasing the diamonds, and we've got a heroic quest, finding and slaying the Hydra to use its blood for the ritual. Already this is much cooler than just casting a spell and being done with it. But before I talk about the ritual I use to resurrect characters in my game, if you're enjoying the content I make, please be sure to subscribe. My goal by the end of 2021 is to hit 25,000 subscribers, and I know that together we can reach that goal, but at the moment, only 20% of you are subscribed. And while you're down there, check out the free sample pack from my Patreon, where I post all sorts of extra homebrew goodies, including the fancy PDF for these rules. Thanks! I love you. Now back to the video. So once you've got everything together, all your material components, what happens then? Well, now the players need to cast the ritual and get their friend's soul back. If you're familiar with Matt Mercer's variant rules for Resurrection, this system will be vaguely familiar to you. To bring a character back, all you have to do is make a resurrection check, but the DC for this check is determined by the player's roleplay during the 3 parts of the ritual: the supplication, the offering, and the anchor. Now, during the supplication, each character must call out to the beyond and make a plea to the Guardian to release the deceased character's soul kind of explaining why they think that the soul deserves to come back to the material realm. Now, this isn't a charisma check or based on any kind of role. It is purely down to the player's roleplay ability and willingness to roleplay. Before the ritual begins, I tell the players, either directly as the DM or via NPC dialogue, that their performance during the supplication and the offering stages is going to make a huge difference on the chances of their friend coming back to life. Then next comes the offering, where the characters must offer an item of theirs to be sacrificed in the ritual fire. This item should be something of value to the character, the more valuable the better, but it doesn't have to be kind of monetarily valuable. Something sentimental would work even better in a lot of cases. And then finally, someone needs to act as an anchor for the dead character's soul. Think of them like the spiritual lighthouse shining out into the beyond. The character who's chosen to be the anchor makes the final resurrection check to determine if the deceased character is brought back to life by rolling a d20. The DC for this final check is 20, and it's lowered by 1 point for each character that has made a satisfying supplication and a worthy offering. If all the players in the party have roleplayed well and made legitimate offerings, the final resurrection check will be much easier, usually between 8 and 12, but there is still some chance of failure there. And then I have one final rule for resurrection that I usually save until the character is revived to drop on my players. And that's you only get one second chance. Once you've been brought back once, nothing short of the most powerful wish spells will ever bring you back again. Saving this reveal until after the character is back with the living carries a lot more weight, I think, because you're saying, right, everything worked out okay this time, but that's all you get. Waiting until the players have been through the ordeal to resurrect their comrade to drop this rule makes the group collectively stop and go, oh, we just had to go through all that stress and danger to pull off this resurrection, but it's not something that we can repeat. And that can really help make them a little less reckless going forward. So those are my rules for resurrection. We've got a time limit that adds the ticking clock drama. We've got a monetary cost. We've got an epic adventure to slay a magical beast for the spell. And then we've got a dramatic roleplay moment in which the players call out to the beyond and make offerings to try and get their friend back. You always get some players who don't care if their characters die, but I think a system like this helps the players consider their actions a little bit more carefully if they know they can't just bounce back up. If you want to get my death and resurrection rules in a fancy PDF, you can sign up to my Patreon down in the link below. You'll get loads more, including game aids, adventures, maps, and more, and even just $1 will get you access to the private area of my Discord server, where you can vote on future video topics. Magical tattoos are one of my favourite ways to incorporate magic into a character, or make characters feel more unique, which is why I'm really pleased that this episode is sponsored by Nat Ones and the Tome of Mystical Tattoos. This project is currently on Kickstarter, raising money to fund production of a fully illustrated compendium of magical tattoos that you can incorporate into your game. The book is fully compatible with 5th edition, including the kinds of tattoos we got in last year's Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and it'll include more than 170 unique designs. The book will also include dozens of new illustrations to spark your imagination, and a quest that sees the players rescuing a legendary tattoo artist, perhaps earning some magical tattoos as a reward. Each tattoo in the book includes the mechanics of the magic of the tattoo, some lore on its origins and design, and illustrations showing the design of the tattoo on its own, as well as how it looks on the body. Now, I love that the tattoos included in the book are illustrated because it makes it really easy as a player and a DM to describe how your tattoos look, and the idea that we can tattoo a dragon and bend it to our will is super metal. The Tome of Mystical Tattoos Kickstarter is already fully funded, and it'll be using DriveThruRPG for its fulfillment, keeping costs low and turnaround quick. The project is running until January 17th, and you can back it using the link down in the description below. Thanks again to Nat Ones for supporting the channel and what I do. I'd love to hear how you handle death and resurrection in your game in the comments below, and if you want to keep watching, check out my series on building an entire homebrew campaign right over there. But until next time, happy gaming.